In a commercial building application, a circuit breaker can indeed function as the disconnecting means for a signed timer, provided it meets specific requirements outlined in the National Electrical Code, specifically the 2005 edition in sections 404.9 and 404.8. According to section 404.9, every circuit and circuit modification shall be provided with a disconnect switch or circuit breaker. This section establishes the fundamental requirement for a disconnecting means to be present. Section 404.8 further elaborates on the placement of the disconnecting means. It stipulates that the disconnecting means for motors, appliances, and other equipment shall be installed within sight from the equipment and readily accessible. It is critical to understand that while Section 404.8 mandates that the disconnect be readily accessible and within sight, it does not explicitly demand that the disconnect be mounted in close proximity to the equipment itself. However, it is important to note that industry best practices and recommendations strongly suggest locating the disconnect as close to the equipment as possible. This proximity greatly facilitates servicing and maintenance procedures. When the disconnect is nearby, technicians can quickly and safely de-energize the equipment, reducing downtime and minimizing potential hazards. Now, in the specific scenario involving a signed timer controlled by a mechanical timer and mounted near a lighting panel, the key factor is whether the circuit breaker in question is lockable. If the circuit breaker can be locked in the open or off position, effectively preventing accidental re-energization, then it satisfies the NEC requirements for a disconnecting means. The lockable feature ensures that the circuit is isolated during maintenance or repair work, protecting personnel from electrical shock. Furthermore, if the circuit breaker is located within the lighting panel, it generally meets the accessibility requirement, as lighting panels are typically designed to be readily accessible for authorized personnel. Consider a scenario where a technician needs to perform maintenance on the signed timer. They would first locate the appropriate circuit breaker in the lighting panel, turn it to the off position, and then lock it out using a lockout device. This lockout device physically prevents the circuit breaker from being turned back on, ensuring the safety of the technician working on the signed timer. Without the lockable feature, there would be a risk of someone accidentally turning the circuit breaker back on while the technician is still working, potentially leading to serious injury. Therefore, the lockable circuit breaker serves as a crucial safety measure. Now let's delve into some additional factors to consider when using a circuit breaker as a disconnecting means. Firstly, it is essential to ensure that the circuit breaker is properly rated for the application. The amperage rating of the circuit breaker must be sufficient to handle the load of the signed timer and any other connected equipment on the circuit. Overloading a circuit breaker can lead to overheating and potential fire hazards. Secondly, it is important to label the circuit breaker clearly to indicate that it serves as the disconnecting means for the signed timer. This labeling helps prevent confusion and ensures that anyone working on the equipment knows exactly which circuit breaker to de-energize. Thirdly, it is advisable to conduct regular inspections of the circuit breaker and the associated wiring to ensure that they are in good condition. Look for any signs of damage, such as cracked insulation, loose connections, or corrosion. Addressing any issues promptly can prevent more serious problems down the line. Consider a situation where the circuit breaker is old and worn out. Its internal mechanisms may be compromised, making it unreliable. In such a case, it would be prudent to replace the circuit breaker with a new one to ensure proper operation and safety. Similarly, if the wiring connected to the circuit breaker is damaged, it should be repaired or replaced by a qualified electrician. In addition to the NEC requirements and best practices, it is also important to consider any local electrical codes or regulations that may apply. Local codes may have more stringent requirements or specific interpretations of the NEC. Consulting with a local electrical inspector or a qualified electrician can help ensure compliance with all applicable regulations. Now let's explore some alternative disconnecting means that could be used in place of a circuit breaker. One option is to install a dedicated disconnect switch near the signed timer. This switch would provide a local means of de-energizing the equipment, making it even easier for technicians to perform maintenance. A disconnect switch typically consists of a handle or lever that can be used to manually open and close the circuit. Another option is to use a plug and receptacle arrangement. This approach involves plugging the sine timer into a receptacle that is connected to a dedicated circuit. To de-energize the equipment, simply unplug it from the receptacle. This method is particularly suitable for portable or easily movable equipment. When selecting a disconnecting means, it is important to consider the specific application and the needs of the personnel who will be performing maintenance. Factors to consider include the location of the equipment, the frequency of maintenance, and the level of electrical expertise of the maintenance personnel. In summary, using a circuit breaker as a disconnecting means for a sine timer is permissible under the NEC, provided that the circuit breaker is lockable, properly rated, and clearly labeled. However, it is also important to consider alternative disconnecting means and to consult with local electrical codes and regulations to ensure compliance and safety. Let's consider a specific example to illustrate these principles. Suppose a commercial building has a large illuminated sign mounted on its exterior. The sign is controlled by a mechanical timer located in the building's electrical room. The electrical room contains a lighting panel with numerous circuit breakers. To comply with the NEC, the circuit breaker that feeds the sign timer must be lockable. This can be achieved by installing a lockout device that attaches to the circuit breaker and prevents it from being turned on while maintenance is being performed. Additionally, the circuit breaker must be properly labeled to indicate that it is the disconnecting means for the sign timer. This labeling should be clear and easily visible to anyone working in the electrical room. During routine maintenance of the sign, such as replacing lamps or cleaning the sign face, a technician would first locate the circuit breaker in the lighting panel, turn it to the off position, and then attach the lockout device. This ensures that the sign is completely de-energized and that there is no risk of electrical shock. Once the maintenance is complete, the technician would remove the lockout device and turn the circuit breaker back on, restoring power to the sign. This simple procedure helps to ensure the safety of the technician and the reliable operation of the sign. Now let's discuss some common misconceptions about disconnecting means. One common misconception is that the disconnecting means must always be located within sight of the equipment. While the NEC does require that the disconnecting means be readily accessible and within sight, it does not always mandate that it be in close proximity to the equipment. In some cases, it may be more practical to locate the disconnecting means in a central location such as an electrical room, where it can be easily accessed and maintained. Another misconception is that any circuit breaker can be used as a disconnecting means. As previously emphasized, the circuit breaker must be lockable to meet the NEC requirements. A standard circuit breaker without a lockout device does not provide adequate protection against accidental re-energization. It is also important to note that the NEC is not a static document. It is updated and revised every 3 years to reflect changes in technology and industry best practices. Therefore, it is essential to stay current with the latest edition of the NEC and to consult with qualified electrical professionals to ensure compliance. In addition to the technical aspects of disconnecting means, it is also important to consider the human factors involved. Proper training and communication are crucial for ensuring that maintenance personnel understand the importance of disconnecting and locking out equipment before performing any work. Clear and concise procedures should be developed and followed to minimize the risk of accidents. Regular safety meetings and refresher training can help to reinforce these procedures and keep personnel informed of any changes in the electrical code or company policies. Furthermore, it is important to foster a culture of safety within the workplace. Employees should be encouraged to report any potential hazards or unsafe conditions without fear of reprisal. By creating a safe and supportive environment, companies can reduce the risk of electrical accidents and protect their employees. In conclusion, the selection and implementation of disconnecting means are critical aspects of electrical safety. By understanding the NEC requirements, following best practices, and considering human factors, companies can ensure that their electrical systems are safe and reliable. Whether using a circuit breaker, a dedicated disconnect switch, or a plug and receptacle arrangement, the goal is to provide a safe and effective means of de-energizing equipment for maintenance and repair. Remember to consult with qualified electrical professionals and to stay current with the latest edition of the NEC to ensure compliance and safety. By prioritizing electrical safety, companies can protect their employees, prevent accidents, and maintain the reliable operation of their electrical systems. So, in a nutshell, the answer is yes, a lockable circuit breaker in the lighting panel generally satisfies the requirement for a disconnect for the sine timer according to the NEC, but remember to prioritize safety and consult with qualified professionals for specific applications. Consider the practicality of maintenance and ensure proper labeling and accessibility. Always prioritize safety and adhere to both national and local regulations.